This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am James Just. With me today is Mr. Richard Fields with his reports from the field, our favorite author, Mr. John Cameron, and joining us from our favorite place in the world these days, Argentina, is Doug. Oh, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce that last name, Doug, so I am going to butcher it. Is that Barbieri?
Barbieri, that's good enough.
This week, we are going to start with the indomitable Mr. Richard Fields, going to give us a nice year in review. So, Richard, why don't you go ahead and take it away for us?
Sure. It was allegedly Vladimir Lenin, of all people, who said, there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. 2024 was like that, albeit a whole year where decades happened. 2024 was a year that people began to lose faith in the elite dictated established order all at once. That lack of faith is epitomized by the election to public office of candidates decidedly not a part of the elite establishment. The most compelling example of that is the election of Javier Milei as president of Argentina in late 2023. Milei campaigned as a radical anarcho-capitalist libertarian economist, promising to take a chainsaw to government spending. He won, and he's been wielding the chainsaw with a vengeance, cutting Argentine government spending dramatically. As a result, the Argentine federal budget is in balance for the first time in decades. Inflation has been slashed. Foreign investment into Argentina has boomed, along with the Argentine stock market, and the economy has emerged from a long, painful recession into growth mode. Unemployment has also gone down. Doug Barbieri, a Libertarian Counterpoint panelist who actually moved to Argentina, has been there while all this took place and will shortly be giving us a boots-on-the-ground description of how it all played out. Sweden has scrapped their commitment to the 2030 climate global directives. Voters lost faith in the FBI and other law enforcement organizations when it became clear that crimes of corruption by Hunter Biden, while his dad was vice president, were being ignored and covered up. Voters lost faith in elite-controlled healthcare bureaucracies like the CDC when it became abundantly clear that they were propagating bald-faced lies about COVID, from its alleged severity to its origin to the efficacy of masks and vaccines to the effectiveness and fairness of the lockdowns and more. Some heard that COVID fatalities in Africa, with its 20% vaccination rate, were not much worse than in the West, with vaccination rates nearing 100% in some countries. Voters lost faith in the climate scare complex when the predictions of polar ice cap disappearance, polar bear extinction, and flooding coastal cities failed to materialize, even decades after when they were predicted by the likes of Al Gore and John Kerry. Voters lost confidence in government bean counters when they were told that inflation was under control, even as it surged to 9%, and when election year job gains turned into job losses after the figures were revised, which happened conveniently after the election. In France, President Emmanuel Macron was compelled to call snap elections, where the National Rally Party won more than twice as many votes as Macron's Central Alliance. In Italy, Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy won a majority of the Italian parliament. In Hungary, Viktor Orban's Fidesz party won the parliamentary majority. The Law and Justice Party won the majority in Poland. And in the United States, the candidate with the felony convictions and civil lawsuit losses, not to mention nearly unanimous disparagement by the elite-controlled corporate media, Donald J. Trump won a second non-consecutive term as president in spite of everything the elites could throw at him. What's interesting from a libertarian perspective is that legacy media, which is, of course, totally controlled by the entrenched elites, are loudly bemoaning these electoral results as a takeover by the far right. They are not. The libertarian Milei is particularly not a man of the right, and the rest of them ran on some libertarian issues, less regulation and government discrimination in the form of DEI policies among them. They also ran on economically illiterate populist issues like the scourge of immigration. But a significant portion of that anti-immigration fear is based on the reality that the entrenched elites have long been encouraging immigration as a way of padding their own party's voter rolls. Worldwide, the people said loudly and clearly to the established elites and their media mouthpieces, "We don't trust you, we don't like you, and we will elect anyone who opposes you." The danger is that the newly elected will wimp out on the reasons they were elected and succumb to the monetary and prestige temptations of becoming part of the establishment elite, ultimately changing nothing. The only leader who seems willing to break that mold is Milei in Argentina. Hopefully others will follow his example. That's this week's report from the fields. I'm Richard Fields. See you again next week. And Doug, you're in Argentina. You've been there while the election took place. You've watched what he's done in the last year. Is he keeping his promises?
And then some. Yes, he's keeping his promises. It's funny though, because people jumped on him because he didn't immediately get rid of the central bank like he said that he was going to do, right? And well, there are realities and reasons why he did not do that. But we are close to eliminating what's called the SAPO, which is basically capital controls that have been in place for quite some time. But the first crack out of the bat, in fact, I remember, I moved here in 2022. I didn't even know who he was. I never heard of him before. It was you, Richard. You sent me an email and you said, when you found out that I was in Argentina, you said, "So is it true? Do you think that, Javier Milei has a chance of becoming president?" And I was like, "Who is Javier Milei?" and I instantly started YouTubing him, and I was watching his videos and absorbing. I mean, he had all these like a lot of appearances on talk shows where he's basically just arguing with people, and he's not nice about it. And it's great, actually. It's really fun to watch. And so I need to find what the heck's going on with this guy. Well, it turns out that he's extremely popular, and I thought it was going to be kind of like another Ron Paul thing, where it's like he's the right candidate, but the establishment just made sure that there was no way he didn't stand a chance in hell. Kind of when I gave up on politics, right, in those days after Ron Paul's 2008 thing, which is where I met Richard, by the way. I gave up. I was like, oh, this does, there's no way you can possibly fix this in the voting booth. Well, Milei proved that wrong. And anyway, he was elected. I remember my wife and I were watching the first of all, we watched the debates that were going on. Then they had a runoff election, and then Milei and Massa were head to head. And I couldn't believe, he won by a landslide in that. And I remember my wife and I were just absolutely overjoyed watching when Massa suddenly was giving his concession speech. She's like, "This is amazing. I can't believe this really happened." Okay, wait for the other shoe to drop, surely the elites wouldn't allow a guy like this actually in office and actually change things. But it turns out he really is the real deal. And I think he really cares about Argentina. And he clearly isn't in it for himself, because he's doing things that, and he's I would say, take a huge risk when you do some of these things. When you go for austerity measures, it can be painful at first, which it was for Argentina, but he stuck it out. And now poverty's falling, and it's below where it was before he took office. Because if you look at the chart of poverty, it's actually going up, and it skyrocketed because of the things they had to do to get things in order. But first crack out of the bat, the guy eliminated like half the ministries, which is under the president's direct control. And then he did a thing called a DNU, which ironically, Christina Kirchner, if you know anything about politics down here, the Kirchners, starting with Nestor Kirchner, and then following with Christina, and she's a controversial character, and she actually has lawsuits and she's actually a criminal. Talk about a criminal. when they talk about Trump and everything, right? No, she literally was prosecuted for fraud and yet became vice president anyway. It's crazy. And the woman should be in jail, but instead she was vice president. But anyway, that whole thing, that's a big thing, that he has to untie all the things that she did, all the things that the government did since Nestor Kirchner. They put a thing in place called the DNU, which gives the president just basically almost dictatorial powers. I mean, he could just say, right, we're going to do this. And then later on, the Congress can vote on it. And then if they don't like it, then they can vote it out and stop it. So he basically implemented all of this stuff. Like he cut departments, and then he rescinded a lot of regulations, really trying to open the market back up, doing everything that the Austrians say should be done, because he is an Austrian economist, after all, an actual economist. I mean, he made his living as an economist, Austrian economist. So the guy knows his stuff. Came in with a full toolkit. It's the dream that we've had, the libertarians have had for a very long time. If only we could, forgive my wife back there, she's cleaning the house. It was the dream that we libertarians have always had. Boy, if we could just have these policies, we could just have somebody talking to the president that knows economics. If we could just have Ron Paul walk in, and actually do the stuff that he keeps talking about needing to be done, man, we would fix the economy, right? We'd turn things around. It'd probably be tough at first, which is what he said. He warned everybody. He said, first, his presidential message when he accepted the nomination and he became president, and he addressed everybody, and he said, "There's no money, no hay plata. There's no money. You open up the central bank and it's empty. It's all just full of IOUs, and it was a disaster. And he said this is going to be very painful, and it could take 2 years to get out of this recession. Well, it turns out it's been a year, and the recession is starting to turn around. And anyway, it's been a wild ride. But watching him do his stuff, and he had the battle with the DNU, because they come up and he had to make concessions. Usually, historically, with his DNUs, man, they would just pass the DNUs and the Senate would go, okay, and rubber stamp it right on through, because it'd be full of pork and, enriching the La Casta, as he calls it, the political caste. Well, they fought the DNU and they put it through the ringer, and he had to make some concessions and pull some things back, but it was still an amazing amount of things that he got through. And he says, and then he came up with the base law, which was a proposal of a bunch of other reforms, and like 600 some reforms. And then he says he's got 3,000 plus more reforms in the pipeline. So 2025, when there's going to be some midterms coming up, and we'll see what happens if we can get more of his party, La Libertad Avanza, which means the liberty advances. That's his party's name. And so we need to get more people like this, because he's actually just they're not even represented in Congress. But it's amazing what he has actually been able to do, even though, most of the political parties are against him. So he's done some incredible stuff. So some of the highlights I could tell you is that he brought inflation under control. It was skyrocketing, and I was watching it all through 2022. I was just watching them devalue the peso. They have a bunch of different exchange rates. It's really weird. They've got the official rate, they've got the bank rate, and they've got tourist rate and soybean rate and all kinds of stuff. These are conversions of the dollar, right? Of pesos. And then there's what's called the dollar blue, and the dollar blue is the actual, it's the market rate. And the government has been totally out of step with the market rate for a very long time, huge orders of magnitude off. I think like in 2022, they were saying the official rate was like 300 or 400, and the actual rate was skyrocketing toward 1,000. So you have a huge separation, which of course means arbitrage. So you need capital controls to keep a flight out of the peso from happening. And so anyway, they have narrowed this gap. It actually went negative for a while, and it's getting so close. Also, Milei had to deactivate. He's got this wizard called Caputo. He's the head of the Ministry of Finance. The guy really is an amazing economist, and he has managed to deactivate what was called the Lelix, which is a time bomb. That if they had just removed all capital controls like Macri did years ago, it would be a disaster. An instant flight out of the peso, would be in hyperinflation. So he's having to balance this also by holding interest rates down so they don't get killed on interest. So all of these things that they were doing, we still had inflation, but he brought the rate down from like 25% a month all the way down to below single digits. Now it's like 3%. I think it's projected to be 2% next month. Some pretty amazing stuff. So now we're in a wash of inflation. I went into stores during the worst of it, and I went into an appliance store, they'd taken all the prices down, no prices anywhere. And I asked the guy, how come you guys took the prices down? He said, well, I just have to take them down. I just have to change them all again tomorrow. That's how fast, prices were rising. I've never experienced anything like that before. It's very interesting. It was nearly hyperinflation. I wouldn't call it hyperinflation yet, because hyperinflation, my understanding is you get paid, you run to the store because the prices are going to change every 5 minutes. So you need to, spend your money, immediately. But this was still massive inflation. And then after he'd been in office for a month or so, I noticed the prices started appearing again, and they were putting the prices back up. And now things are way more stable. They maybe have to change prices, once a month or something. Maybe they augment a little bit, but it's a lot more stable. And people, they have prices up in print, whereas it used to be in chalk, and because it changed so much or whatnot. They didn't even bother putting them up. So that was an amazing accomplishment, just watching that, boots on the ground. And it's been tough. It's been tough for the tourist industry. Tourism is just fallen off a cliff because the peso is so strong. And now Argentinians are going. So what was happening traditionally, because the peso was so bad that you had Brazil and you had Chile and Uruguay, everyone coming here. And of course, European tourists and American tourists. And the town I live in is called Bariloche. Beautiful little town. If you ever want to take a visit, come visit. It's got skiing, and typically their high seasons are summer and winter, right? And it's just been dead this high season because, and this is our summer down here, it's been dead because the Brazilians and Chileans, they're just not coming because the peso is too strong. They were taking advantage of it when it was weak. And this is great. I get a great exchange rate. Sure, that's great for tourism, but it's not so great for prices for the people, on the ground that are having to pay. They have terrible wages and the prices keep going up. Well, it's turned around. Now wages are starting to rise. Prices have stabilized. And now Argentinians are the tourists. They're the ones that are going to Brazil and Chile. And they're particularly a lot of Brazil, because Lula it's a whole other story there. Lula is a socialist. He's President Lula. And that guy's just ushering in massive inflation and tariffs and all kinds of stupid policies. And so now everyone's going there, So that was an interesting turnaround for Argentina.
Hey, Doug, I get to work with some people who are from Argentina or who have they still split some time. Most recently, I have a guy whose wife is an immigration lawyer. Spends half her time in Buenos Aires and half her time in Mexico, oddly enough. And one of the undercurrents when I talk to them is, now everybody, even those who are skeptical of Milei, seem to have a sense of hope. Right? Is that something that has changed since you've been there?
Well, first of all, Milei, even in the toughest times, I think he had over 50% popularity, and he's retained it because I think people know the guy's not a crook. He's not trying to shiest people. He's really trying to fix the country, and so people had hope. And the news media would go out in the street trying to get an interview of some guy saying, "Yeah, screw Milei, he's screwing everyone," and everyone they kept getting people, and they were just like, "I believe him. I know I believe in him. We're holding on. It's tough. I know it's tough, but I think the guy knows what he's doing, and we're allowing it to happen, and he's still retained that popularity. And you're right. I think there is more of a sense of hope. But there's kind of been one anyway. Everyone's been saying, yeah, Milei knows what he's doing. And because you go, well, what's the alternative? Even people, so, the political situation, not everybody agreed 100%. Even the people that supported him, well, you sure you want to get rid of the central bank? They're kind of like that. But everybody knew something drastically needed to change, that we couldn't just keep doing the same stuff that we were doing before and expect a different outcome. Because it was clear that the path that we were on was just impoverishing the country. And there was just and everyone knows we need to change, and we need to take it. It's going to be hard. And, it's constantly in the news. They're coming, oh, well, look at this, what do they call it? More fraud of the government, where supposedly this money was supposed to go to this housing complex, and all these people invested a little money, and the government was going to bring funds in, and that money just kind of went into somebody's pocket, and it never materialized, and all these people were left without homes. It's that kind of stuff that just keeps coming out, fingers in everybody's pie, the absolute abject corruption, bold-faced corruption, where it's just right in your face. You didn't care. Just took the money and ran, kind of thing. All kinds of stuff like that in the government. Kind of lots of examples. And those stories keep coming out, people seeing it. It's like, yep, this is the old guard, guys. This is what they did to us. And Milei has had positive results. We're starting to see salaries are starting to go up. And like I said, prices have stabilized. And investment is starting to come into the country. So these are really positive signs. They just said they're going to go nuclear power, and Argentina is actually going to start selling nuclear power, and that's going to be really big because they've had problems with that. Just the whole government managing energy is always a disaster. So
we'll stop on this. This is going to bring John's heart. We'll make John happy here for a minute. Argentina is their ambitious nuclear program for AI development. John's all into nuclear energy, and Argentina taking advantage of a new regulatory landscape to get in on not just nuclear power but also AI, as we have Microsoft and all these other companies, starting their own power plants.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Because I know they're going to go modular, and I think the first modular is supposed to come online in 2030. And they had I guess there's 3 existing power plants, and they had one under construction that was run by a Chinese consortium. And Milei's not a big fan of the Chinese. Do you know if somebody else is going to take that over and get it finished, or is it dead in the water, the 4th nuclear power plant? Do you know?
This I don't know. I need to look into that. So I don't know unless James knows.
I think it's cool, and I'm the same thing's happening in the States. The local NIMBYs are trying to stop it everywhere, but it's amazing that nuclear power is evil, and then all of a sudden when the big boys and the tech companies want it to happen, it's good. Yeah, nobody says anything about it. So I'm glad that it's happening there. The other questions about infrastructure, and I don't know if you've got an answer to that either. A lot of South American countries have a very tenuous power grid. So even if they bring power online, they can't get it from point A to point B. How is Argentina's grid?
Well, it was very common to have rolling blackouts in Buenos Aires. I haven't experienced any power problems since I've been here. I think I lost power once or twice, and usually it's the rain comes. So it seems like it's pretty stable to me from my perspective. Now I'm down here in Rio Negro, and power has been pretty good. But I remember once I was walking through a neighborhood in Buenos Aires, and bam, the whole blocks were shut off. And this lady was yelling at the current president as she slammed her door behind her. And that apparently, from what they tell me, that's pretty common, particularly when you get into the summer and you get a lot of people coming online. Buenos Aires gets really hot, and people will crank in the air conditioning. So I imagine it's probably got its problems. I don't know for sure, but that is one of the things that I'm sure Milei is going to address, but probably in a way of having the government do less and private industry do more.
One of the questions that I have that relates to the psychology of Argentina, and it was a country that had fallen prey to the empty promises of Peronism for over a century now. And basically, the promises of Peronism are essentially socialist promises that say, we'll give you everything you need, you vote for us. And they did. I mean, an awful lot of people became dependent upon the state for either subsidies or income supplements or retirement pensions, that sort of thing, particularly a huge bloated public sector. A lot of those people, I'm sure, are not feeling the optimism that the productive sector of the economy is feeling. Are they starting to see the light? Are the diehard Peronists and socialists, are they starting to see the light and say, there's opportunity here for us too?
Well, Perón, Juan Perón, and then later on his wife Eva, he was, and then I think he had like a second wife. I'm forgetting her name, but Ava's the popular one where you see with a microphone. That's everyone loved her because she was the giveaway program, but he was a big fan of Mussolini. And so he decided, hey, we should restructure the country like Mussolini did. He closed the society down and massive tariffs and all that stuff started happening with him. So this is stuff that's been in place for almost 100 years since him. But the interesting thing is, so at first the Peronists were against Milei, but actually some of them are starting to come around. And like you say, they're starting to realize, we do need to cut this stuff. And the worst people are the Kirchnerists, and they're the ones that love Christina Kirchner. And she was kind of Perón too. Her husband, Nestor Kirchner, like Perón dos, he's and so and they're the biggest problem, I think, of Argentina. There is the left, the actual socialists, but they're they got 2% of the vote. Nobody cares about the socialists, but there is a lot of.
My apologies, Doug. We have got to go. We are out of time. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Richard, for hooking us up with Doug. Thank you, John, for stopping by. Thank you for watching. Please remember to have a good night. Love everybody.
This is Gail Morgan thanking you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint each Thursday at 8 p.m.